Hi folks, I'm back with another video, and this time the video is going to be about RSS newsreaders. So RSS, just to be clear, stands for really simple syndication, or that's generally accepted. There's a few other interpretations of what it may stand for, but what an RSS reader effectively is if you're looking at a news site, something like this is now an individual news site, independent online news in South Africa. You'll see lots of articles, adverts, clutter. It's very difficult actually if you want to go through, say, 60 or 70 news sites in a day. You're going to spend a lot of time sifting through information in a very difficult to read format. Obviously, if you're only going to read one news site, not such a big problem, I don't think. But in my case, I do a lot of tech blogging, so I tend to go through a good 50, 60 different sites in a day easily, and each one might have 20, 30, 40 articles. So an RSS reader is effectively going to bring just the news that I'm interested in to me without any clutter, adverts, or anything else. Or generally, should I say, not adverts. Sometimes there's ways that also gets inserted in the feeds, but it's a way of focusing purely on what you want to get through, where there's a lot of information. Again, you're not going to be using, well, I hope you're not going to be using social media sites, for your general news. So again, the RSS sites that you're pointing to, that's all you're going to get. If you've chosen 5 or 6 or 7 high quality news sites, that's what you're going to get when you go through your RSS feed. So before I jump into the actual applications themselves, I just want to show you here, like typically this is a news site. You'll see sometimes this little symbol here in orange. That is the RSS icon. They do it in different ways. Sometimes they don't display the icon at all. You can use apps. I think I've got an app like this one over here called Feed Reader, Open Feed Reader. It will actually find feeds in the current tab and present them to you that you can subscribe to, because essentially in your RSS reader you're going to subscribe to individual feeds or unsubscribe from. That's how it works. So if you click on this one by IRL, they've done it actually quite nicely. They've got a page here specifically then with the links. So the advantages are going to be, if you just want general news, you could subscribe to just that link. You could right click and just copy the link address, and then paste it in your RSS reader. But if you wanted, for example, just crime and courts, or just South African news, or just sport, or just motoring, these are the ways you can fine tune what you're getting, so that it's not just one big long general feed of all sorts of things that aren't relevant. So that's just to give you an example of where you find the feeds, and you'll find them on many sites. My own website, for example, I always make sure I've got an RSS feed available for people that don't want to visit my site, but they want to, for example, just get notified of any posts that I make, and then they can decide whether they want to read the full articles. So remember, that also means in most cases, if you're reading through your RSS reader, you're not going to have to actually visit each and every site. You might very well click on the link and go through to the site for more detail, but the point is it cuts out a lot of that time taken. The other advantage is your RSS reader is going to notify you as soon as there's new articles, and it'll hide what you've already read. Now, that I tend to use websites for that, but many people use an RSS reader app on their phone, so whether Android or Apple. And you will probably be familiar with things like, and let me just show you what I have been using really up to now, has been Inoreader. Inoreader has got apps, as is Feedly and a couple of other very popular RSS readers. So ever since Google Reader died, people that like me that were very into using RSS readers moved across to things like Inoreader and Feedly. The point with these guys is that it's a great service. You can just log in and subscribe and off you go. But they don't give you all the features. Obviously, they've got a paid model as well to pay for the service that they're hosting. So certain things like you might not be able to set filters. You might not be able to filter out duplicate articles and certain little things like that. Oh, and a maximum number of feeds. For example, I only have 150 feeds max that I can subscribe to here before I have to pay. And of course, they put a lot of adverts in. You won't see many here because I've stripped out advertising. You'll see there it's blank at the top there where it says remove ads. Naughty me, I'm not supposed to do that, I suppose, but that's the reality of using one of the online services. So something else has happened in the last week or so. My OpenMediaVault service at home, I have installed something called Nginx Proxy Manager, and it's given me a lot more versatility in terms of using my subdomains and routing traffic through to my house, using my OpenMediaVault as a server. So I've just been looking at a couple of other applications I could branch out into, and I'll still do another video about what I've done with OpenMediaVault, why it's working so well for me at the moment. But this is just the first effect so far. I've decided, you know what, let me move my RSS newsreader feed away from Inoreader, and I'm going to host it myself. Actually wasn't a very easy decision, as you'll see when we get to it now, because it really depends on what you want from an RSS reader. It's not about the most features is the best reader for you. It's about which are the 2 or 3 that are most relevant to you. That's going to help you decide. So what's good for me is not necessarily going to be good for you. But there may be 1 or 2 particular features on one reader that's it. You can't live without. That's what you need. Then you know what? That's going to be probably the reader you need to go for. So just bear that in mind. I haven't even made my mind up yet which reader. I've actually installed both. So it's an opportunity just to contrast a bit about 2 alternatives, and then to let you make up your own mind, really. I certainly haven't made my mind up fully yet which one I'm even going to use. So yeah, that was really what's happened there. So for me, you know, typically this is the view that I use. I've got my these are the source subscriptions, if you want to call it, the different places that I've subscribed to get news, and they are organized by categories such as interesting, innovation, technology, must-read articles, gaming, favorites, that sort of thing. So that's a view that I need, and then of course within each one I need to see the list that I haven't read yet, and you'll see if you click on it, then I typically would like to see a quick, what they call a third pane view. These are essentials for me. I don't want to have to open pages all the time to go and see what the article is about. I want to be able to scan quickly and to see, you know, whatever I'm busy going through. Even if it's a longish article, I want to read it quickly. I don't want to open up all the pages separately. So that actually is the most important things for me. And there's another thing that I do tend to like looking at is the stats around the feeds themselves. Which are the feeds that are busiest? Which are the ones that are inactive? Maybe recommended feeds, that sort of thing. And if I go here to settings, subscriptions, you'll see, for example, here in Inoreader, I've got mine sorted by the amount of engagement I've got with the feed. In other words, which are the feeds that are most read articles? I've sorted down with these. So these are the ones I want to keep because and by the way, these are possibly the ones that take up the most time for me as well. It shows you how often they've updated, whether they're healthy or not. This one's got a problem. And I can go right down to the ones that I don't read very often. And the question is, do I want to keep them in or don't I? Actually, yes, I do, because sometimes I'll look at the articles, but I don't necessarily always read the articles. It means I haven't really engaged with them, but sometimes it's things I want to keep track of. So that in a nutshell is pretty well much that. So Inoreader, it's a good reader. There's nothing wrong with Inoreader at all. It's just that, like I say, I've got the facility now in-house. I like to move things in-house when I can. And, you know, I've got a lot more control over it myself. And of course, nobody's looking at what I'm reading or how often I'm reading or anything like that. I'm in control of the stats and the usage and the behavior of what I do with it. So Inoreader, the only other thing I can really mention about it is, you know, it's got a dark theme like this. It's got an aqua theme and it's got a light theme. It doesn't have much more than that. But RSS reader is not supposed to be pretty. It's about functionality and speed. You know, across all the readers as well, the functions such as marking as read, how old, archiving are fairly similar. What I did do though is, and this before we jump into the 2 readers, is I did this comparison. I always, when I'm trying to decide something on new technology or services, I invariably draw up a spreadsheet. I'll put product 1, product 2, product 3, and I'll look at the essentials or what I think are important things that I want to look at. And I will fill them out basically left to right as I go through and make sure I've got all the gaps filled. And then I'll start highlighting things in green normally that are quite important and that are pluses for me. I will mark something that's in red that's important that I should take note of. There are other things maybe that are yes, it's got, or no, it hasn't, but these are not necessarily things that are vital to me in my use of the RSS reader. So if I just run through some of the criteria, so the other ones obviously I'm going to be looking at here is FreshRSS and tinytinyrss reader. The reason why I've got only these two, they are both actually quite popular alternatives, but the reason was they both had Docker images that install fairly easily on my OpenMediaVault. So yes, I could go and install manually and go to a lot more trouble and so on, but hey, Docker images, you can pop them in 2 or 3 configs, spin them up and they're running. So that is mainly why I arrived at these. I think there was only 2, or there might have been a third one, but these were the 2 best that I looked at. So typically I was looking at something that's open source. They're both open source. FreshRSS just got an additional requirement there. If you make changes to the source code yourself and republish, so that's not going to affect most people anyway. Cost obviously free for all features. Wasn't all free with Inoreader. These were some of the limitations. Can I self-host? Well, I can't do Inoreader, but I can do those two. Databases, not vitally important really. What works in the background is not really important to most of us, except that you will notice with things like SQLite, there is 1 or 2 functions, I think duplicate posts or 1 or 2 other things that is not available because of the database functionality. So just to bear that in mind, it's not a major thing. It's not really affecting what I'm doing so much. But the other reason is the next line over here, is that things like SQLite, they can be basically just set up on the fly and they run as is. So that's why I noted here, wow, guess what? FreshRSS, I installed it, very quick to get going. You just pick SQLite and off you go. Whereas with MySQL, sorry, I should actually say it's MySQL, that's the correct pronunciation. MySQL and the PostgreSQL, you have to configure the database. So there is a little additional step. So with the containers and Docker, I basically had to create a Docker container also for MariaDB, configure it, set it up, and had to make quite a couple of tweaks there to get the tinytinyrss to work. Otherwise, that would not have worked. So just bear that in mind. It's not difficult. The steps are relatively standard, but I did struggle a bit with, I forget what. I wasn't getting it to connect properly. I mean, it took me a good half an hour plus to figure a couple of things out. I think it was more typos on my side, but just to mention there, it took a little bit longer. Then themes. The plus with FreshRSS is that it's a slightly newer product than tinytinyrss, or should I say rather TT-RSS. It's a very mouthful. TT-RSS has been around a lot longer, but its age shows as well in its theming and its appearance slightly. So what you'll pick up is that, I should have marked this in green actually, it's quite a big plus for FreshRSS. It has definitely got a slightly nicer interface. Both have got different themes to choose from. The ones for TT-RSS are relatively basic though, although you can add additional themes, but that you'd have to manually install them. Then the Share To, in brief, they all share to email. Inoreader has obviously got a vast amount of options to share to, but just to note there, it doesn't share to things like Wallabag, Mastodon, and GNU Social, and a few of the others in the Fediverse. That's like direct sharing, okay? It does share to Telegram, which is quite interesting, and I imagine that goes to Telegram groups, of which I've got one. But again, I wasn't using that. It does, however, share to Diaspora. So Diaspora is part of the Fediverse. So if you were to have a Diaspora account and you shared your posts directly to Diaspora, the advantage would be anybody on Mastodon or GNU Social or whatever else would normally be able to also follow those posts or see them. Then obviously with FreshRSS, it does share to LinkedIn, Twitter, Wallabag, to Mastodon, Diaspora, Facebook, and so on. It was really easy to actually set these up. You basically just had to enable them in the menu settings, and when you chose to share to LinkedIn or Twitter, the first time it'll just take you to a site, you log in and authenticate, and thereafter you could just click and it would show the post. So this could not have been easier. Very, very, very nice. I was quite impressed with that. I think if sharing directly to sites is important to you, then FreshRSS could very well be your option, because on TT-RSS, it's a bit more difficult. The email is there ready to use, but these other ones, Wallabag, Mastodon, Pinboard, and so on, you have got to manually configure those, copy them into the server directory, activate the plugins, sometimes even edit the config file. So I would say that this could actually, I should have marked this probably with an orange or a red here. This is quite a little bit more difficult. In my case though, I tend to take the link, I go to the actual site, and I normally make my posts linking back to the original site. So even Wallabag, I'll just take the link and I will save it in Wallabag. Wallabag, for those that don't know, is a sort of a read it later pocket type service. So it wasn't terribly important. I'm going to look into see how this affects my workflow though. Then the other option was there is sometimes a public share URL. So what happens in this case is where you got a post that you're busy reading but you'd like to share, you could actually just, like with TT-RSS does, you can just, it'll create on the fly a share link for you, and you can just share that link straight to Twitter or to wherever, and people will actually come to your TT-RSS and read the post there. So that's quite an interesting option. And of course, just to read it with the next line, notes and annotations, both Inoreader and TT-RSS allow you to add a note to your post or to your article or your, whatever you're resharing. So again, those two go together quite nicely if you want to do your sharing and let people read it in your reader. I'm not really doing that, to be honest. So it wasn't critical for me, but for many others, this could be quite critical if that's how you want to do it. Then, as I mentioned a bit earlier, the feed stats. So I've shown you a little bit there with Inoreader already. FreshRSS does have feed stats, quite good feed stats, and I'll show those to you just now. TT-RSS though hasn't got any feed stats. It's just got errors and inactive feeds. So it's got the basics, but not showing how often you're engaging with them and what's keeping you busy there. I just skipped email digest, sorry. Email digest is really feeds that you haven't read yet that have come in, say, during the night. Do you want your application to send you a digest of that you can just quickly skim through in an email and then go and mark them as read or whatever within the application? Well, out of all of them, that is something that TT-RSS does do. It's a built-in function. So if that's something that's important for you, again, there you go. This could also be used, for example, for if you wanted to send this to a friend or colleagues or something else, you could set this up as well, that it would actually happen on the fly. So again, something of interest there. I mentioned already the reading with the third pane. They are all there. So by default, FreshRSS did not have it available. But getting the extension to work was not too difficult. I basically just had to copy the extension file, drop it into the plugin folder, and then in the menu, I could just go and enable it. So yes, although I had to install it sort of manually, there wasn't much effort at all. There was no configuration really required, and that's why I marked it green. To me, it was fine, and you'll see it working beautifully. The article snippet view was just another thing. So when I'm looking at the list of articles, it always gives the title or the heading of the article, but does it include a line or two of text for you just to quickly see what the article is about? Inoreader does do it in magazine and list views, which I don't actually use, funny enough. They're too detailed for me, too busy. So yes, it does have it. The FreshRSS has got it in the reading view only, which is also not the one that I really use. And TT-RSS actually does do it. The disadvantage possibly is that it actually makes it look quite cluttered and busy, as you'll see just now. But yeah, just to say, again, if it's important, that it's either that you're going to use, or maybe the third pane reading, through the third pane. So I tend to actually use the third pane more, and it has less clutter. So maybe in a way that's why I mark those. They are to me more important than the snippet view. Then just mobile apps, Inoreader and TT-RSS, being around very long, obviously has got quite a few mobile apps to choose from. FreshRSS, I understand, I'm not sure it's got its own dedicated app. I see it's got an API that you can activate for TT-RSS. I'm imagining with what happens here is that the TT-RSS readers or the apps can be used to point to your FreshRSS installation. But what they do say is that it is very mobile web ready. So you would use your mobile viewer and it'll actually look and work very much like an app. So that's the other thing just to remember. You don't always need a native app. The only thing you're going to miss out if you don't have a native app is probably notifications, push notifications. That's the only thing. And then lastly, just there are the websites for those interested, just want to go and have a look at the actual sites. So I suppose let's go and look at the first one then. I'm going to look at FreshRSS Reader. One thing you'll notice, or you'll notice when I show you the next one, is that you can actually give it a name. You can give your site a name, which is quite nice. So that's a customizable thing which you can set up. And I think both of these allow you to create multiple users. So, whether you want to run it for yourself or just family and friends or whatever, they could each log in. You can have a user created. They can have their own feeds and do their own favorites and keeping track of what they've read and so on. So this gives it a nicer look, really, I suppose. On the left here, you've got your categories, like I've got for free and open source, environment, Android, faves, that sort of thing. And under each one is the different feeds that have got some unread articles in. You'll see also you've got a favorites. You can just go and look and see what you've favorited over there. If you've got any labels, and otherwise you're going to get a view. So for example, if I go to FOSS over here, I should see all 5 articles. You'll see if you look at the little icon on the left here, this is the 3 different individual subscriptions. So you can view all of them, or you can view just one at a time. The other thing that you're going to notice here, which is unique to FreshRSS, is it's got a plugin which you've just got to activate and also put in, but it's got a read time, estimated read time of the article over there, 4 minutes, less than a minute, and so on. So that's quite interesting. That's what I meant by the third pane. There you can see the article, and it's beautifully rendered, easy to read. So this for me is perfectly usable in the third pane view, really as is. There's not much more than I do. I tend to go through my articles. I'll quickly check if there's something here that's of interest that I want to read. And then what I'll do is I'll just mark it all as read, and it'll move on to the next category. And that's how I sequentially go through everything until I've read it. And if there's something that I really want to keep, I tend to just right click over here on the article header and open a new tab, and then I'll work from inside that tab. And if it is something that I want to read later, and that's going to be the advantage here with FreshRSS, and if you go to the trouble to install it on the other one, I would then share it to Wallabag. That's my read it later service. So in a way, FreshRSS at the moment, because Wallabag was very easy to set up, as were all these other options here, that I can just push it straight through to my Wallabag instance. So in a way, this is going to really maximize my workflow, the FreshRSS one. So that's something I'll have to consider. Let's just have a look at the stats side. I'm not going to go through all these other options really. Maybe I can just show the read views just so you've got an idea that this is the standard view at the moment with the third pane. This is the global view, which, yeah, I'm not sure why you'd want to do that. The read view, or the, what is this one? Yeah, the reading view is whole articles only. That's too busy for me to have to go through if I've got 30, 40 feeds in a subscription. So for me, for this one, I would only be using the normal read view, which is that one. That's perfectly usable for me. In the settings, I just want to go to have a look here, statistics. This is the type of statistics it's going to show you. How many unread, favorites, there it's showing you your top 10 feeds, so that's very useful for me. Entry count and percentage read of the total. Remember I said I want to see how I engage with it, so it's doing what I want. Entries per day, it just shows you how busy the feed. I've only been running this for a day, by the way, so you're not going to see much longer stats. Feeds per category and entries per category. Then it does show you things like idle feeds and articles repetition. This, I think, is actually its updates, refreshing, feed refreshes and so on, how often, how busy the feed is. You can see, is it going to be every day you're going to get a lot of articles, or So this will have to build up over a bit of time, I suppose. I don't know if there's anything else on settings. Maybe just display. Let me just show you the... So these are the themes. I'm on alternative dark, 1 of 11. And look how nicely it's done. You can sort of get a quick idea of what the different themes look like. So yeah, that's the themes, and these are the pre-installed themes. I didn't have to do anything. Languages. You can choose what appears above or below the different articles. These are your default reading settings. Remember, we already looked at the different views, but you can do sort order, what to display, adjust, categories to unfold, and there's quite a few settings there. There's the archive settings. I don't tend to archive, or certainly not unread articles, put it that way. So I don't switch on certain of these things. But this is quite nice. You can push a purge, you can optimize the database. Quite a bit of control on this one. There's your share settings. The only things I had to do here was for Wallabag. I think I just had to put in my address of my Wallabag instance. When I clicked to share it, it asked me for the login and did all of that. And Mastodon was the same. Because there's multiple nodes or instances, you just got to point it to which one you want to log in and do, and the same with Diaspora. But the rest were all automatic, and there's a couple of others over here you can see that I haven't configured. So there's also Pocket and Pinboard and a few others. Yeah, user queries, you can obviously configure and set up queries. Here are the extensions. So you can see these were community extensions that are not by default installed. So you've got to go and fetch them and just drop them into the extensions or the plugins folder. And then after that, they'll appear here, and you can just enable or disable them. Sometimes there are settings that you can set. Let me just see. No, that one I don't think has got. I'm just trying to see. Image proxy. So if there is applicable, then you'll see like that there are some settings you can change there. Yeah, and it's also got to check to see that it's all installed correctly and if there's any problems and so on. So yeah, I'm fairly impressed with FreshRSS actually. I'm sort of leaning towards it. Let's go and have a look though at TT-RSS. So this is again the same or similar view. You'll see here on the left you've got your categories, faves, technology, Android, and under each you've got the different subscriptions that you've subscribed to, and it'll show you the unread count for each one. Again, I can click on say technology and see all the technology ones. I've got 128 unread ones. That's what I meant by the snippet. You can see just under the title over there you've got a little snippet of text. But bearing in mind you've got the third pane. So the third pane on TT-RSS was already built in. I didn't have to include a plugin to activate it. It's already there. So there it is. If I can just get something similar. Basically works the same as the other one. I don't think here is very much difference. It just looks a bit busier over here. The question is, am I going to use this or not? I don't know. You can select multiple ones here and carry out actions on them. You can click to star or favorite, and then you can just go look at all your favorite articles there. That's very much the same as FreshRSS. The difference here is published articles. Published articles didn't appear on FreshRSS. This would mean that there's a link that was given out and somebody can, as I said, come into my service and see the post with any notes that I'd made. So that's a view for that. Obviously archived, recently viewed, and also shared articles, anything that I've shared. There's an example, the start article, I'd made a note, and you can see there it says this is a note about this article, and you could type out whatever you wanted to put in there as well. So again, that's just a feature. Both those features, the publishing and the notes, is not in FreshRSS. So is that important to you? That's the question. That may be your big decider. Otherwise, this view is fairly similar. If you're reading the article, there's the difference now is we don't have the share unless you've manually gone and activated it with the plugins. So what you've got here is things like edit the article note, which I've already showed. show related articles, toggle the full article text, close, that's this reader, forward it by email. There you've got a nice little thing ready to forward, and you can just send it. And there's an option also there for share by URL, and that's where you'd get the URL that you could then just give out to anybody actually. So yeah, that's pretty much the interface there. Let's go and just look at some of the similar settings. You'll see there's no estimated reading time, but under preferences here, these are your themes. So no preview. I've got the night blue CS on at the moment. I can change that to default, but you'll see now I'll have to go and save it first of all, and then I can see what the change is. That's the default one, but there's also a light version. Very bright. More themes is going to take you to a page where you're going to have to go and install those themes. So yeah, it's not so hot on the theme side. This is just your updating of feeds and confirming when read and so on. Your plugins, there's a couple of plugins. These are mostly default plugins. The only one that I installed was the time to read one. Then you've got feeds. You can obviously here control what you're subscribing to, delete them, whatever you need to do, import or export. And I can maybe just mention on the importing, both of these, I'd exported my list of subscriptions from Inoreader, and both 1 or 2 clicks imported that OPML file, and everything was created like this with the categories, my subscriptions, etc. in already ready to use. So just bear in mind, it's very quick and easy to move from one reader to another. Mark similar as read. There's a couple of other options here that you can. You see here it says database type not supported. So that SQLite database doesn't support that. There's filters you can set up also with rules and so on. Labels that you can create, and multiple users. So this is where you would create other additional users that could be using your system. So it's quite useful. This is just errors, if there's any errors and so on. And that's pretty well much it on setups. I can just show you another thing here quickly. This toggle widescreen mode really just moves your third pane to below here. Obviously that's if your page was a lot narrower. So that's the toggle. So the views with TT-RSS, the problem really is I'm not seeing where the views change. You can click on and off your third pane obviously, but you didn't have the same views that you had with FreshRSS. What I can just show quickly on the stats side as well. If you go to the feeds option of the preferences, you've got here feeds with errors. So there's one that's got an error. You can unsubscribe, or you could go and edit it, I suppose, and it'll show you possible inactive feeds. But you know, again, like I said, very, very basic actually. You can edit the feeds quite easily though. If you go to a particular feed, like say my broadband, if you right click on it, you can say edit, and this is where you would change the URL of that link to the RSS that you saw on the news site. You could change the category, the actual website's URL, how often it updates, whether it requires authentication or not, whether to include in the email digest or not. So this is how you could make that digest, tweak and tune it, to some particular articles. And yeah, there's a couple of other options. You can change the icon and the plugin. So this is quite useful. So I think in a nutshell, yeah, really with the TT-RSS one, the tiny RSS, it's got quite a fair bit of power and a lot of options, but yeah, it's a little bit dated, I think, possibly. It's slow. Like I said, it really is going to come down to, you know, what you want to use and what you need to use. I just want to check something back on the reads here. I just wanted to show you. I don't think, yeah, there's no quick option there. It's this little symbol on the left hand side over there. You'll see the little cogwheel for the settings. That is where you could set filters. You can get stats for that particular feed. Oops. You can go to the website, or you can manage. The actualize will be doing a refresh, or you can mark it as red. This is where you're going to set information like changing its title if necessary, description, website. That's the feed, the RSS feed. You can check the validity of the feed, what category it fits in, if it's going to be visible in the mainstream or not. Archiving rules, that's if you need to authenticate to it. Let me just check. There's a couple of other rules you can filter, and you can also do some maintenance on it. So, give or take, they are largely the same. I don't think there's much difference there. So yeah, it's a difficult decision. I don't yet know exactly what I'm going to do. I'm probably going to use both maybe for the next day or so, and then just get a feel for which for me is going to make the biggest difference. But I hope that was sort of interesting to some, just in terms of, firstly, you know, what an RSS reader is and what you could use it for. By the way, it doesn't just work with news articles, because podcasts and certain other things are also RSS type format. You could subscribe to a podcast feed as well, and then receive the audio or the video podcasts inside here, and also read them and unread them and that sort of thing. So that is possible. I'm just generally using it for getting through lots and lots of news with as little as possible distractions, that I can just process all the content effectively. So yeah, I hope that was of some interest. I'm hoping then that one of my next videos is going to be around how I'm using that OpenMediaVault now to actually host additional third-party services such as RSS readers and a few other things that you'll find in Docker containers. So that might be of interest to some if you're interested mainly in using your home hosting, even though you are connecting through an ISP where you're getting dynamic IP addresses that keep changing. I'm going to try and just explain very high level conceptually how you could be hosting some services out of your house where it'll appear as if it's sitting really on some hosted server or VPS or paid for service on the internet. So if that's of interest, keep tuned, as they say. What do they say? Hit the like and hit the bell or something like that below the video. And you can obviously get notified then when I post that video. It should be hopefully in the next couple of days. But yeah, stay safe out there, enjoy further, and I'll see you in my next video. Thank you.